It's a real pleasure to be here. And look, I do want to thank Dickie. I think this is really important, and congratulations on this new group, Perpetual Digital. But it is really important we come and talk about these things because technology is changing so quickly. And, and it is driving this disruption in all our lives and in business. And you will all have heard, various stories and see it in your own business. But so I thought tonight we'll sort of, talk a little bit about that. But you do need to have these discussions because it is moving very, very quickly. In fact, I think that, a lot of people talk around, did it accelerate during COVID? I sort of think it did in a way, but I'll come back to that later on. I think the real transformation is still sort of running through multiple industries. But like you, I've been around technology. Well, as Dickie said in that very long thing, I started at IBM as a systems engineer. I actually was an assembler programmer. Does anybody know what assembler is? Oh, look at that. Well, I'm amongst friends. Well, these are two friends anyway. I'd come from an arts degree and I was at IBM for 21 years. And IBM was a great company, but gee, you'd say, it's still a great company today, but definitely the Googles and the Facebooks and the big platform companies have sort of really, dislocated where this great, American, tech company was. And you sit there and you say, well, why does a company like IBM, or even you could go through multiple, RJR, Nabisco, big corporations, why do they fail? What causes companies to not reinvent themselves? As Dickie also said, I sit on a whole raft of different companies now. So, Chair of CSIRO, by the way, CSIRO, we'll talk a little bit about it, is just an incredible Australian asset. It's a great privilege. It's the best meeting I go to all month, really. And the best time I have is with scientists, not dealing with the politics of, new science ministers and stuff. But CSIRO, I'm on the board of Ramsay Healthcare. Healthcare is going through enormous, change at the moment, and you can see it all the way from genetic engineering, pharma tech, all the way through in terms of digital healthcare. Even when you go in for an operation now, the amount of technology in the operating theatre is just enormously different. Then you got Xero, which is sort of what I'm wearing tonight. What an incredible, company. Started in New Zealand. Born in the cloud, and we'll talk a bit about cloud later on, and serving a market like small and medium businesses who have not had access to this enormous amount of technology that you now have through basically a platform as a service type thing. So this is sort of changing the world. And then, the big challenge for a company like Xero is, can it scale globally out of Australia and New Zealand? And by the way, that is a really big question, to try to answer. If I asked you a question, which is always an interesting one, if I said to you, and you don't need to answer this is sort of rhetorical, okay, how many new Australian companies have come into the top 10 in the ASX over the last 25 years? How many would you say it was, roughly? Well, in fact, if you go back, I think Microsoft was established about 1973, thereabouts, sort of the PC era. I think in that period, the only company, putting aside CSL, who was really, government funded, is actually Macquarie Bank. It's the only company in the top 10. Isn't that amazing? I find that really worrisome. By the way, Xero got into number 19, but then we fell back to number 21 because, it's one of those, is pretty volatile in that end. Anyway, so I'm not sure I have any great, brilliant insights tonight, but I do want to share some of the technology trends and directions, then come back and talk a bit about how do you drive transformation in your business? Because I think it's really important for all of us. And I don't know where all you fit in the organisation, but this is a leadership question for all of us, not just for the board, not just the CEO, is how we grab this technology and and really do something unique with it. And so when I hear what Dickie's trying to do in trying to transition, into new services, you've got to do that. You've got to keep really at the forefront of it. So we'll sort of try to explore a little bit of that as we go forward, and I'll tell a few, war stories along the way. But this technology, I have this great privilege of sort of seeing it work across nearly every industry, maybe not every industry, but most industries. So I see the way it's changing science and research. A classic example, have you ever heard of the square kilometre array? The square kilometre array? So this is this is about discovering the universe. So this is funded by 12 nations. Australia is one of the nations. Over in Murchison. We have 1 million square hectares, and we have 37 dishes and then 5,000 arrays looking for the origins of the universe. There's one in Australia and the other one's in South Africa. And I think we probably collect about, about 1,000, well, probably, what would it be? It would be more than terabytes. It would be petabytes, I think, every hour. It's just pulling all this data. Then I was telling someone the other day, there was a thing on LinkedIn, because we put these little things out every so often, and the headline was, CSIRO discovers 1 million new galaxies, in the last 3 months. Now, do you know how big a galaxy is? Anyone know how big a galaxy is? How many stars in a galaxy? There's 1,000 million stars in a galaxy. So the Milky Way, we have 1,000 million, and in the last 3 months, CSIRO through the Square Kilometre Array discovered another 1 million galaxies. Just blows your mind, doesn't it? So is there terrestrial life out there? Well, you'd think there is, though it's interesting. Every astronomer I ever talk to, I say, look, have you ever seen a UFO, or, is there any sort of other sorts of life out there? They say, we think there's life out there, but we don't think there's anything like humans. And they look at all the probability of all the things that came together to create this species as we talk to each other, and they say it's very, very unlikely. Interesting, isn't it? I'm not sure I believe them, but you know what scientists are like. They always say, well, they say there's no facts that would prove it. Anyway, but this technology, the thing about it is that it's enabling, and we've never seen it before, all these new business models. Changing the way we actually run companies, and allowing you to do things that we never actually saw before. So that's why I think it is so significant. And it's easy to just get sort of a bit blasé about technology. My iPhone, I love my iPad, things like that. But it really is a really important thing that we need to understand. And I think it's important for Australia. I don't know if you realise, but one of the biggest challenges we have in Australia at the moment is that we can't hire enough technology people. So in Sydney here, and I'm in the market all the time looking for hiring people, there's just a dearth of talent. And I don't know if you're finding that too, Dickie. And we should be right at the forefront. This should be a pillar of our economy. Now, I love mining, by the way, so don't misunderstand. I love resources sector long may it continue to be successful. We may need to transition out of coal and some of those fossil fuels, but we've got all these trace elements. We've got this enormous a backyard full of great assets. I love the agricultural sector. Agriculture is enormous driver of wealth, but we need to build this third sort of pillar, or this third leg of the stool for us to really be successful to go forward, because the markets are going to change, and we really need to be right at the forefront. So let me just sort of talk for a moment about some of the technology changes I'm seeing, and I'll try and sort of make it a bit exciting as we go through. As I mentioned, a lot of people say to me, David, it's been amazing, COVID, has accelerated the digital transformation. Look, we're all on Zoom. Who likes Zoom? You know, I'm sick of Zoom, to be quite honest. And they say, Zoom has sort of changed the way we work. Now we can all work from home, which is great. It's true, and I do like the step change in terms of what's available for us to do. E-commerce is sort of exponential. E-commerce has been really strong through the period. There's been legislative change that has come through, like digital signatures. Are you using digital signatures now? I mean, Frydenberg's got to keep that in because it's so arcane. I mean, the amount of paperwork we still have going through. And then, of course, health consultations. Before we weren't able to do health consultations. By the way, the only reason that was the case is money, is about, what reimbursements the doctors get. So there's been a lot of policy things holding back, technology adoption. So, but has it really, driven fundamental change in big organisations? I'm not convinced. I'm not sure that boards and executives and leaders like yourselves and myself are really grasping the opportunity, because I think there's just so much we can do that can really transform this, experience we create for our customers, how you do risk assessment, adopting new technologies in terms of, more automation. And I'll talk a bit about that in a moment, because I think that we're still, the rate of technology change is accelerating, not slowing. And a lot of people think it's slowing down, but it's not. So let me sort of talk around, some of the changes I'm seeing. So, Dickie mentioned cloud compute, cloud. So what is it about cloud that's so great? Well, in a way, when I first came into the computer industry, there was a thing called bureau services. Anyone remember bureau services? Which a bureau service was a big computer that people shared. And basically cloud computing is that, but at a whole different level. So what you've got is a completely different cost paradigm for computing. It's on-demand computing, and it is changing the way we actually run our businesses. So I'll give an example. Xero, we developed some code in New Zealand, and literally, as soon as we've developed that code, we put it on the platform, and it's available in the UK, the US, and right throughout Asia, just like that, bang. That sort of scale is just enormous in terms of the productivity you can get. So we think that cloud computing is probably at best 15% through its growth cycle. So AWS, if you're looking at investing, AWS, I think Microsoft got enormous growth, and Google Cloud's coming hard behind, and IBM as well. So just because all the compute power that we've had in organizations is going to move into this on-demand model. So this is big. The other big thing that is in computing is quantum. Now, has anyone done any work in quantum computing? Do you understand what quantum is? Well, you're an exciting audience, aren't you? Quantum computing in its simplest form is computing is based on zeros and ones, right? Whether it's on or it's off, and then you got this whole binary system. Basically, with quantum, there's an infinite number of states that any component can be, and therefore, when you're doing computing, you can actually do it in parallel at multiple scale. So the best analogy I can give is if you take the fastest computer in the world today, and I think that's a big IBM, a supercomputer, a simple quantum computer can probably go at about 180 million times faster. So it's just absolutely enormous. So when you start thinking about doing complex algorithms or complex computing or modeling, this is game changing, because it allows you to do far more what if predictive type work. And so whether you're in financial services, or if you're a chemist, or if you're a scientist, you can do all this modeling, and just enormous change. So we don't see any real change in the trajectory in the cost of computing being more cost effective, better value, and when you need it. Now, the when you need it, pay on demand is really important. And that obviously is enabled, which we'll talk about later on, is this whole cryptocurrency stuff that you are all across, I know. Any miners here? By the way, I'll come back and talk about that. Anyway, the second bit is communications, and that was Telstra, and I was here. But the ubiquity of communications is really important. I mean, we've seen it through COVID, and then how we connect, and your mobile phones, and we all couldn't live without them. You lose this before your wallet. Does anyone carry a wallet anymore? Anyone carry cash? Yeah, no, a few people carry cash. I haven't carried cash for about, I don't know, a year, actually longer probably. It's amazing. And by the way, that's just gone, it's been quite an exponential move on cash. But we think in terms of connectivity, we still talk around fixed broadband, the NBN and wireless technology. And we have Wi-Fi versus so-called 5G. That technology is all going to converge together, and you'll just be connected all the time. And there'll still be some challenges out in regional Australia or remote places. But anyone who's looked at up in the sky and the satellites, anyone looked at Elon Musk's satellites? I looked up the other morning, and it was about 5 o'clock in the morning. I looked up, and literally there was a stream of, what do they call it? It was Gate 23 or something. And there was about 400 of these things flying overhead. And his whole vision is create this sort of low orbiting satellite connection. It is just unbelievable. And so he puts them all up, and they're nanosets. Is this interesting? Yeah, okay, right, I'll keep going. So I can remember going to NASA, because CSIRO does a lot of work in space, and remember the big satellites. They used to stand taller than this area here, and they'd sort of be right across here. The nanosats these days they put up are literally this long. They're a cube, and they just shove them up, and so there's literally. There's too many up there. I didn't feel comfortable. I did not feel comfortable. But so connectivity is going to continue to go at a real pace, and I think the price point on connectivity will, all this stuff around, price per gigabyte, what sort of plan I'm on. It just is not sustainable. And I love Telstra and I love telco, but it's got to go to a far simpler model going forward. So you've got this incredible change in computing, incredible change in connectivity, and that's going to be in the home as well. Have you ever counted how many devices in your home are actually connected? Anyone? You haven't done that? I reckon, just think about it for a moment. I think the average home now has probably, you got to think of televisions and radios, but the average home would have more than 20 things connected. But then once you start getting your electricity and your solar panels, so this whole sort of connectivity, this connected world is really taking off. So they're the two big ones. The third area, which is important to understand, is software itself is changing. How we code is moved into a whole different world. And I just want to try and give you an example. When I was at Telstra, we used to do, and I'm sure this is not any of your organisations, we used to have a big billing system, a big CRM, so we used to have, I don't know, 20,000 people in the call centres, and then what we'd do is we'd sort of, we would do this big transformation, and then the whole company would know we're going to do a new software drop over the weekend. And then there would sort of be great, consternation all week, and there'd be sort of big meetings all going through to Friday. Is it a go, no go? And then, over the weekend, they'd take the old system down and bring up the new system. People were holding their breath. I used to get called on Sunday night whether it be operational on Monday morning. Is this familiar to you? And these huge, great systems. And half the time we knew what was going on, but it was a bit of guesswork, to be quite honest, because it got so complicated. We'd have 15 layers of software, databases having to be synced. You took the database down. Was the data still, in a fit state to bring it back up? And then, we used to have meetings at 8 o'clock every Monday morning. We'd all come in and there'd be bated breath, are we up? And there'd be a sigh of relief we were. So that was the old world, you know. And by the way, I'm afraid that is still very much the world of many corporations today. Let me compare that to a company that's born in the cloud. So, I'll use Xero as an example. So Xero, we have 3,000 software engineers spread all around the world. They operate in 300 teams of 10 people each. This is no different to the way Amazon works or the way Google works. And they are responsible for a block of code, can be multifunctional, and their world is defined by that world and APIs that interface in to all these other people. So our average team of 10 will make, 10 to 15 new versions of code released every day, which will be tested overnight, and off they go. And so it's a continual improvement. That is radically different to the way most of our hierarchical, structured organisations work. And when you think about it, they use a word, because remember, Xero started in New Zealand, called kotahi. Any Maori here? Kotahi is a word around a strength in unity, and it's about how teams work together. And the reason they call it kotahi is that when they're all working together, they're continually updating code, but it doesn't impact any, the other member, because you're totally a self-control. You need some coordination, but it is really different. So we can drive new functionality. So if you're building new functionality, you can deliver it literally every day, every week. It's just continual going on. So these financial considerations about how these platform companies are working, that's why they're getting these enormous valuations. So, I don't know what you're like, but I can still remember in 2005 when we were looking at buying some companies. So remember, Telstra bought 4 big platform companies in China. Do you remember that? It was an online real estate company, an online auto company, an online IT services company. Bought them for a couple $100 million. We list them at about $5 billion. Enormous value creation. But the whole thing around this was just this enormous sort of change that was going on in how software was built. And that's what. And anyway, when we used to buy these companies, people would come in and say, "Oh, David, it's a really good deal. It's only about 15 times. And I'd look at the P&L and I'd say, and EBITDA would be sort of negative. I'd say 15 times EBITDA, and how's this work? And they'd say, David, you look at the top line, and so the valuation on Xero is 19 times revenue. And so this is where it's not around profit. I mean, we actually do make money, so but it's just completely different the way we have been done. So as every analyst and every investment fund got rocks in their head to value companies like this, well, I think some of the valuations got out of line. But the inherent value in these companies is just enormous, because you get this network effect, and once you've got customers on these platforms, so the lifetime value of customers is just enormous. So it's technology, but it's actually changing the way we run our businesses, and that's what I worry about, that people don't get it, that this is radically different to where we were before. I mean, and look, I could go on and talk around. I mean, I'd really love to see the perpetual data services, because, a lot of people say, big data. By the way, do you all know Data 61? Do you know who Data 61 is? You do, some of you do, okay. So Data 61 was the old national IT lab the government set up out at Australian Technology Park, okay? It then got turned into Data 61. It's a government-funded, deep data science. It's been around for about 15 years and got some of the best data scientists in the world. So do you all know about big data? Big data is cool, right? Well, that's what people say. Yeah, well, it's meant to be cool, but it's actually very, very hard to do, very hard. data is in multiple different forms, it's unstructured, it's messy, and you get bad data. I mean, is all your customer databases perfect, right? I don't know, most of my customer databases, you got David I. Thodey, D. Thodey, David Junior Thodey, it's all over the place. And so cleansing data to be able to make good decisions, or even in analytics, it is really, really difficult. So Data 61 is a group that's looking at data science. It's now will be the National AI Centre of Competence. So we are now the government just funded us for $100 million to set up a national AI and machine language centre. So data is really, really important, but it's very difficult. And that's why I would suggest that if you've got an opportunity to put your data into the cloud that someone's managing for you, I think it's a really sensible idea. There is a great organisation, anyone heard of Snowflake? Yeah, well, some of you need to get, into the tech scene a bit, I think, Snowflake is one of the highest, just taking off. It is, it's all cloud-based data management, and it is, I tell you, it'll be a good investment if you are looking that way. By the way, I am on in Evans and Partners, we have a technology disruption fund, which is, I don't know, I think it's about a couple of billion we invest. And I tell you, it has just been, a real blast. I mean, it is by the way, it's not the big Googles. I mean, Google, Amazon, they've all been doing pretty well. Microsoft's been a good investment, but it's all these sort of mid-tier, technology companies. There's just enormous value creation, and you should look at it, Okay. Then you go to AI, and AI is really great. So when do you think the latest prediction of there will be a intelligent computer with the intelligence of a human built by? Any guesses? Well, this is Kurzweil, who's sort of the big futurist. These reckons around 2029 that there'll be a computer with, sort of intelligence that is starting to, at least be equivalent to a human. It will not have the emotional stuff, but native intelligence. So this is happening really quickly. And then you add robotics into this. So has any of you actually interfaced with a robot? And what's that? You got one next to you. Who needs to build one? You got them, yeah. Well, robotics is going really quickly, and there's lots of different types of robots, and the drones and the robots that are doing in the military have gone to an enormous sort of level. But then there's the humanoid robots, you got the Honda Wanasumo, which is the one that sort of you see walking around. It sort of shows a bit of emotion, but these are happening really quickly. So I think that if you put AI and really sort of greater intelligence with robotics, you start to see a world actually within the next decade that is going to be pretty different. So is this all good?
Yeah, as long as it's not Terminator.
Terminator. Well, that raises a really good point. It's interesting. Most of the time at CSIRO, well, not most, 30% of the time, we are looking at the ethics of the science and the work we do. Because with all these great sort of, developments and discoveries, how it's used is really important, how you control it. So, for example, in AI, the algorithms, quite truthfully, to know exactly what's in an algorithm is really hard. So you have people who sign off on an algorithm to say the integrity of an algorithm, but you never really quite know. So you remember the big debate around 5G and Huawei? So the big discussion there was nothing really that ASIO or ASD, so they're our spy people, could actually point to say there's a problem. But it's what they didn't know was what worried them. And that was and how you could get certification that actually it was a safe environment was the issue. And it's a bit like, well, has anyone been through a ransomware attack here? Anyone been through? Oh, gee. I would have thought someone would put their hand up on that one. I've been through 2 ransomware. You're too scared to put your hand up? Well, you know, because this is the reality of these systems. We had to go through a ransomware attack and, you know, they had got in. Luckily, they didn't get to the customer data. They wanted to close down our internal network. And so we were able to actually shore it up. And in that particular case, we survived. But in another one, you know, you know, they put customer data out on the dark web and showed that they actually had the data, and then said, "Hey, just you know, a couple of thousand very expensive bitcoins, and we'll be fine." Actually, it was a special cryptocurrency. So this stuff is pretty real, and so we do need to really stare at the ethics of this stuff. Hey, how am I going for time, by the way? 7:30. You okay? Okay, good. I won't go on for too long. Anyway, but look, the reason I talk around this stuff is not there's a bit of gee whiz in it, but it's just that I mean, I've been in the tech industry for 45 years, and I've lived through various different, you know, hype curves that, you know, technology is going to change the world, etc. I've never seen a period of so much innovation and technology coming together that enables us to do business differently. And that's really the big message. But there's the people who are staring into it, and there's the companies who are not. And that's why I think it's critically important for every company in Australia to really understand the implications of this. I was interviewed by the AICD, you know, magazine just literally yesterday on this, and the question around whether boards have got enough skills to actually make decisions around what's going on. And is there enough skill sets in management, line management, to really understand the implications of this and how quickly your own business can be disrupted because you've not adopted new technology. Now, I'm not saying that every technology is good, and you need to really make sure it's really grounded in good business decision making about what outcome you're going to get. But gee, I tell you, this is really quick. I mean, even as I was mentioning, well, I'll come on to healthcare in a moment, but Xero is a company that's 12, 13 years old, and after, I think it was year 9, we completely redeveloped the code base, completely redeveloped it. So you can't stand still no matter who you are. And remember, I don't think any of your jobs would not be dependent on computational power, you know, every one of you. And even if it's just your iPhone. But anyway, it's so this is really important. And you know, when you know we're looking at a you know, the transformation of CSIRO, and even, you know, we try to look out 10 years, but we try to look at what the organisation would be like. How do your scientists actually work? And we don't think we'll have labs in 6 years. I mean, the days of good old Bunsen burners and, you know, throwing things together, remember those, you know, pipettes and sucking stuff up, all that. That's all gone. You know, I mean, our scientists are in the US, well, before COVID they were, and they're dialing back into the lab, you know, doing experimentation. They're modelling work. I mean, to make it sort of a bit realer, I had an incredible presentation from the McKinsey guys the other day. Anyone's a sailor here? Anyone? Do anyone watch the America's Cup? Yeah. So, I mean, the technology on those, you know, I suppose they're yachts, is just unbelievable. So I mean that those huge, great things that just on these foils, literally, you know, this big. And they were demonstrating, McKinsey worked with them to build, you know, real-time analytics on, you know, the wind speed on every part of the sail, the actual impact of the hydrofoil, and they could really do real-time adjustment that could be fed into the person who's on the helm. I mean, that's unbelievable. In fact, to the point that I think in the last round, they actually made sure that you couldn't do that because they were starting to get, a bit unethical, whatever the ethics are. But so you start to think about that and you think of this real-time adjustment of high-performance machines. It is just, I mean, if you're into Formula One racing, the amount of technology in those cars is just unbelievable. So it's touching everything in our lives as we go forward. So, so what do you do about this stuff? Well, I mean, I would really encourage you that you've got to come back to what you're trying to achieve in business. Now, it was really interesting, and Dickie didn't show me his charts before, but Dickie started with his vision, mission, and strategy, right? And you've got to really know what you are as a business or a division, whatever you are. That is the thing, and you've got to think big. You've got to have big aspiration, because that then drives you to adopt new technology to drive real outcomes. And the only way that businesses really succeed is by having big aspiration and big measurements in terms of metrics. So that is absolutely fundamental. So at CSIRO, we have a really big aspiration. Ramsay Healthcare, we just bought, the Spire Group, bought. We're going through an acquisition process. It will take a year because of competition regulation in the UK. Can you fix that at all? Yeah, good, yeah. I mean, it is unbelievable. Anyway, but all of that is about, having big aspirations about what you're doing, but being really, really disciplined about the metrics you're going to achieve through that at the same time. But then once you do that, this is about transformation of your business. You've got to know how your business works. And you've got to re-engineer it and then apply the technology to that. The technology itself doesn't do it. It's what it enables you to do. And if you get that right, you can really, drive incredible change. And I think it's really important for Australia, really important. I think our level of technology adoption, we are good adopters, but the deep transformational stuff, we're not as good a leader as we should be. The interesting statistic is, in every European country, if you look at the tech sector, it represents about 8 to 9% of GDP. Do you know what it is in Australia? It's about 6.5%. So we really under-index in terms of the tech sector. So, and I get it. I mean, I go down to Canberra and talk to the politicians. We've got to go. They sort of don't get it, and it's not about. It isn't the geekville, it's actually business people really understanding technology and how to apply it. Now, it's great to have the Atlassians and the Canvas, and there's a plethora of companies who are doing quite well. But we need more of them for the economy to be really strong. And I do think that we need it in the health industry as well. Do you remember Bill Ferris? Used to be, Bill was at, what was the name of the company? Anyway. Yeah, that's right. And Bill was chairman of Innovation Science Australia. And he was looking at R&D tax credits, what was working, what wasn't working. And there's, that's normally what in the budget cycle, trying to cut a bit of, expenditure. But he came out with what I thought was quite inspiring. He said, Australia should aspire to be the healthiest country in the world. I'll say it again. Australia should aspire to be the healthiest country in the world. And the reason he said that was that there's a lot of natural, outdoor living. We love the beach. We love, the outdoors. But he said, when you actually look at it, Australia should have the best genetics. We should be doing sequencing the gene of everybody in Australia. We should be doing pharma tech, really big scale. Biochemistry. We should be really driving out, all the research. I mean, there's a lot of work being done in oncology, cardio, and it's an incredibly good export for the rest of the world. And we actually have our scientists, medical scientists, are in the top 10% in the world, but where we fall down is actually the commercialisation of our research. So it's actually at the other end. So we score 91 out of 110 countries in terms of commercialisation, but we're in the top 10% in terms of science excellence. So something's wrong, isn't it? It's sort of like, and by the way, the other big problem in this area is anyone worked in a university? Anyone done? So some of you have, okay. Well, it's really interesting. When I often ask that question, not many hands go up, because the number of academics who have actually moved across into industry and vice versa, industry back into academia, is really low. If you ask that question in the US, about 30% of the hands will go up. We just don't have people moving back and forth from deep domain research into, industry. And if you're an academic, it's sort of like, we're sort of a bit like where the UK was, I don't know, 20 years ago. There was sort of the ivory tower, I'm a scientist, I don't deal with money, that sort of thinking. And of course, the UK are getting a lot better at it. So the whole thing is around, we need a bigger vision that's going to drive, us to really build out new industries. And I think there's an incredible opportunity. I see the scientists at CSIRO, they are brilliant, as I said before, it's the most fun I do every month when I actually meet with them. All the administration stuff, but when you get them and, and they're talking around, be it, climate change, Great Barrier Reef, what's happening in the current patterns, the discovery of, new species in the Bass Strait, through to drought management, water management, hydrology. It's just an amazing set of people. So, but you've got to be driven by the outcome. So I think it's really important that we understand this stuff and then apply it. And you don't need to be a CEO, but you need people who take leadership, who stare into this stuff. And it's not up to the IT department, it's up to every business leader. It's like, and then I'll be quiet in a moment. It's like, I see boards say, oh, well, we've got to be digitally enabled. And no, I love people under 30, just in case. We'll hire a digital native who's, less than 30, and now we'll be a digital board. Well, it's just a lot of baloney. It's like being on a board and not being able to read a balance sheet. Just life today requires you to understand the impact of technology because it is just so pervasive. And you see, graduates come out of university. They are so technology literate. It's just the way they work. It's just what they do. And yet I still see executives who, just don't use technology. Even, I'm pretty, I'm technically literate. I had to invest time, I use Cortana. I got Alexa on my, you know who Alexa is? Okay. Problem is sometimes when you're talking on the phone, Alexa goes off and does something for you. But, you've got to get familiar with this stuff. Do you see anyone use Office 365? Do you get any little notes from Cortana at the moment? You see they've just turned that on, and it's not bad, it's not perfect, but you've got to be with it, and understand how it's working. So, look, my big message is this is an exciting world, and I could keep talking for a long time, but I really think it's important that we all sort of stare into it and take advantage of it for ourselves, for businesses we work for, industries we work for, and for this great nation that we have the pleasure of living and working in.